So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session with GreenStep. Thank you for joining us. Before we start today, I would like to acknowledge that the land we identify as RTO9 is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat peoples. RTO9 will honor and respect the land, the people, and the treaties. We are extremely thankful for the original tour guides of these lands and all that they have shared. All those that reside, work, and play on these lands are treaty people, and we must honor the treaties in a mutually beneficial and equitable manner. With 1 in 5 Indigenous people in Canada living in Ontario, we believe working together in a mutually beneficial manner will help all Ontarians prosper through the joint development of the tourism industry. As an ally to Indigenous people and a partner of Indigenous Tourism Ontario, RTO9 will commit to improving the socioeconomic conditions of Indigenous people through tourism by creating space for Indigenous people to tell their stories on their terms. I just wanted to touch on a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started too. First, if you didn't hear, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available for viewing after the session today on the RTO9 website, which is just rto9.ca. You will also receive a copy in the follow-up email that will be coming out. There will be a question period at the end, so if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box, which is done anonymously at the bottom of your screen, or you can put them into the chat window on the side. We have lovely staff from GreenStep who can step in and answer some of the questions you might be having. You're also going to receive an email following the session, as I mentioned, with the recording, but it's also going to have a 2-minute survey link. If you're able to spare some time to review the session and give us some feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. Now I'm going to pass it off to the lovely staff at GreenStep. We have Shaylin and William and Leah's here also. They're going to be taking us through the introduction of sustainable and regenerative tourism today.
Thanks, Meg. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Introduction to Sustainable and Regenerative Tourism webinar. My name is Shaylin, and I'm a Senior Sustainability Specialist at GreenStep. And I've worked very closely with the tourism industry across Canada, including a lot of operators and closely with RTO9 as part of the Advancing Sustainable Tourism in Ontario initiative. As Meg said, I'm joined by my colleagues, William and Leah, so I'll just let them introduce themselves before I kick things off and introduce the agenda for today.
Thanks, Shay.
William, over to you.
My name is William Hogg. I am Business Development Executive with GreenStep. I've been in that role since January of this year. Prior to that, though, I was working very closely with tourism businesses like yourself here in Quebec. I was with a city DMO located in the Eastern Townships, responsible for sustainable and regenerative tourism at the local and regional level. So I know where you guys are coming from. Looking forward to talking with you guys all today.
All right. Leah, did you want to just do a quick introduction before I move into the agenda?
Sure. Hi, my name is Leah Watrin. I'm a Senior Sustainability Specialist with GreenStep. I actually am pretty new to the team, but will be joining Shay along for some trainings and certifications, as well as working with hotels in Montreal to help them with sustainability projects.
Thanks, Leah. All right. So our agenda for today is we'll start with some introduction to sustainable tourism and really help to build a common language around what we mean when we're talking about that term, as well as some of the other terms around sustainability that you probably are starting to hear in the industry. Regenerative tourism, nature positive tourism is a new one that's emerging, and there's a lot of conversations happening about this. We'll also talk about the business case for sustainability, and then we'll finish things off around how you can start to share your sustainability story, regardless of where you are or how long that you've been working towards sustainability. Before I dive into the content, I wanted to highlight a really exciting new initiative that RTO has put together for all of you, which is a Fast Track to Sustainability Masterclass. This is going to be offered in January next year. It is being offered at a discounted rate by RTO9 for just $100, and that will give you access to a 4-part workshop series, each workshop being about 2 to 3 hours, going through the steps of learning about sustainability. Some of the content will be what we'll cover today, but it's going to be much more in depth around the concepts of sustainable tourism, learning how to measure sustainability specific to your tourism business, planning. So that's much more about how you can build a sustainability action plan for your business. And then talking about ACT. So how do you put that action plan into practice together with your employees? So if you're interested in this fast track, please reach out to Meg. Meg, I'll let you share your contact information, but this is a really exciting class. And you'll be doing it together as a cohort. So you'll get also the opportunity to engage with each other and share some of the best practices that each of you are probably already doing. And we'll get into that today. A little bit about GreenStep. We are based in Kelowna, and that's where I'm based as well. As William said, he's out east in the townships, but we were founded in 2008, and we've worked with thousands of businesses across a number of sectors, including tourism and hospitality. And our founder, Angela Nagy, who some of you may have heard from at the summit a little while ago that RTO9 put together, identified a common challenge across all businesses where owners and managers want to do more to reduce their environmental impacts, be responsible in business, but with competing priorities, they often lack the time, knowledge, and budget to make meaningful progress. And it's really our mission at GreenStep to support businesses and organizations on their sustainability journey to help reverse the effects of climate change and protect our planet and communities for future generations to come. We are a certified B Corp, and we've also worked very hard to power all of our operations with renewable energy through Bullfrog Powered. And each year we conduct a carbon footprint measurement of our organization to achieve that. And we've also recently renewed our carbon neutral certification. Just wanted to touch on some of our clients and partners that we've worked with across the industry. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've worked very closely with the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, including many of the RTOs within the Ontario region and RTO9 through our Advancing Sustainable Tourism in Ontario initiative. So that's quite a broad initiative that I've been a part of since 2021, I believe. And we were certifying many of the regions across Ontario, of which RTO9 received their certification last year for the destination. And now we're moving into really supporting operators and stakeholders within each of the RTOs, which is really exciting.
Shay, I just wanted to add that there's an exciting new project coming down the chute with Tayo that's going to be much more focused in on operators. So keep a lookout for that sort of end of spring 2025.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Now, before I go into the introduction to sustainable tourism, I'd like to get an understanding of where everybody's at when it comes to sustainable tourism. So we've got a poll for you here. Please just pick what resonates best with you. But really what we want to know is how familiar are you with the history of sustainable tourism as a concept and how to integrate sustainability into your business or organization. So I'll give you a few seconds to put your responses and then we'll see where everyone's at. Okay, we've got a few experts in the room, which is great to see. Hopefully you can all chime in with some great examples if you've been at this for a long time. We'd love to hear from you. But it looks like about 60% of you are fairly new to the concepts, which is not a problem at all. That's why we have this webinar today. Okay. So what does it mean to advance sustainable tourism or become involved in sustainable tourism? It's, as we all know, tourism is a very fast-moving industry, but there's a lot of great actions, and probably what you'll find is you're doing a lot of it already, but maybe you haven't seen it defined in this way before. So we'll start with some introductory terms and definitions, to help you create a common understanding of what this means for you, not only as a business owner, but someone who lives and recreates and travels in your own personal lives. One of the areas I'd like to touch on briefly is what I'll refer to today as the business or global perspective of sustainability. Many of these global definitions of sustainability are based primarily on Western science and have been developed largely without Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. Only recently did I learn about two-eyed seeing, where many organizations, communities, and individuals are starting to apply traditional Indigenous knowledge to these Western scientific frameworks and knowledge systems, which tend to be present in almost every single space that I've worked in, both inside and outside of the tourism industry. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is what I'll be sharing as common language and definitions, while relevant to modern business practices, are actually strong knowledge systems that have been practiced by Indigenous peoples all over the world, including here in Canada. Sustainability today, as it was defined by the Brundtland Report in 1987, is sustainable development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this report was the result of one of the first international exercises to understand how economic growth was impacting the environment. From that exercise, there was about 900 pages of data. I've never read it, but from that, a common definition for sustainability really was born. And it really speaks to this need for us to ensure that we're not causing harm to our living systems, places, and natural assets that we all depend upon for sustaining human life. These symbols may look familiar to some of you. These are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and they are used very widely all over the world by organizations and primarily governments to agree on a common set of goals that we should all be contributing to in some way, shape, or form. Some businesses that I've worked with choose to align with all 17 goals, and they have very specific actions that they want to pursue related to each of these. But what we tend to recommend is have a look at these and maybe pick a couple that really resonate with you and also align them to your passions. As business owners, you're in the business of tourism because you have a passion for it. Not pursuing action towards all 17 of these goals doesn't mean that you're not sustainable or that you don't care about the others, but really choose what resonates if you choose to align with a framework like this. And then you can build from there.
Just a quick comment, Shay. I've seen businesses who have tried to tackle all 17 and essentially gave up, or at least became overloaded with this too broad of a focus on sustainability. So yeah, focusing in, finding the ones that you're passionate about, very good suggestion.
Yeah. You also might be familiar with ESG, or corporate social responsibility. And this is another framework out there that does exist. Many businesses, particularly large businesses, choose to align with this framework. Just a little bit on the history. CSR, or corporate social responsibility, originally was more about charitable donations and looking good on the outside, or sometimes we say paying penance for social and environmental sins. Today, CSR has really shifted more into ESG, or environmental social governance, and it's really about looking at non-financial factors when assessing the performance of a business, particularly the environmental social factors, which include areas like climate change strategy, biodiversity, energy and water efficiency, equal opportunity, human rights, etc. These are all good frameworks, the UN SDGs, ESG frameworks, and it's moving the needle in the right direction for all types of businesses, but there are some key aspects that are missing when it comes to tourism, and we'll get into that today. So what is sustainable tourism? This was born at the first World Conference on Sustainable Tourism in 1995. where the World Charter for Sustainable Tourism was originally adopted. Excuse me. Still getting over a cold. It was defined as tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and host communities. In doing this, sustainable tourism ensures that all resources are managed in such a way that our global and local economic, social needs can be fulfilled, while at the same time, and this is key when it comes to tourism, maintaining cultural integrity, essential ecological processes, biological diversity, etc. What tends to be missing in a lot of these frameworks is that natural cultural piece. As a result of tourism activities or tourism businesses, you are bringing people to a destination, and that in and of itself has an impact on the culture and the natural system. So we want to shift it so that that's a positive impact and not negative, so that tourism is giving back to the community versus taking from the destination. And that's where we start to move into concepts like regenerative tourism, because tourism really does have an incredible power to create regeneration. And perhaps you've experienced this or witnessed this in your own travels. Shared love for culture's food, bringing people together from different backgrounds, well-designed, accessible infrastructure that is inclusive for everyone, or perhaps the beauty of a natural wonder of the world. Regenerative tourism is much more about giving back and healing a destination. Traditionally, we've seen this, and it still happens today, where people travel to a destination and they're just taking the resources, they're consuming it for an experience, but there's nothing being given to the community to help support its regeneration so that that will be sustained for years and generations to come. Regenerative tourism really does look at ways that we can create a net positive impact. And that really requires a place-based approach that considers the unique circumstances and opportunities in host communities, of which all of you operate in a community. You live there and you work there, and ultimately you are the essence of that place. A few key principles of regenerative tourism. As I mentioned, it really does take a holistic understanding and living systems approach. This is an acknowledgement that everything is interconnected and interdependent, and understanding the nature and quality of the interactions between everyone who lives in the destination and the entire tourism value chain, including how they influence each other and the entire ecosystem. It's inclusive, it's equitable, transformational, and it's inspiring. And it's a lot about cultural and natural stewardship, protecting local culture, heritage, traditions, Indigenous peoples and ethnic groups. And sometimes you'll hear out there that there's a conversation around, what is the difference between sustainable tourism and regenerative tourism? The way that we view it, regenerative tourism is a part of this broader sustainable tourism. Sustainable tourism does encompass all of these things, but regenerative is more about healing some of the past damages that we've done, and ensuring that we can create a net positive impact in the future. I wanted to share some examples of what that looks like, because we can talk about theory all day long, but what does this mean for you and your business? There's some pretty great programs out there that have happened in Canada, and just wanted to highlight a couple of them for you. One is called Thanksgiving Back, and it's happened here in British Columbia in Revelstoke. And this is an example of regenerative tourism that has taken a more organized approach by the Destination Management Organization. They worked together with local businesses in the community to introduce a visitor volunteer program that would happen on the weekends of Thanksgiving, so more in the shoulder season of when visitation would typically happen to that destination. And they worked with many different organizations and businesses to allow visitors to visit the community in return for their volunteer hours, they would receive free accommodation for the weekend. But they had to give back to the community for one full day with a selected organization of their choice. Some of the initiatives or partnerships they worked with was a local food initiative. So, this is even just going in and cleaning up all the garden beds at the end of the year and making sure that they had space to plant more food next year, invasive species removal, trail maintenance, and even event support for one of their very popular cultural events at that time of year. Some other examples, and some of you may be doing this, and if you are, please share it in the chat for others to learn. But this can also take the form of voluntary or mandatory environmental conservation fees at the point of sale. So that could be per guest night, if you're selling tours or bringing people out into the community. Many businesses that I've worked with as part of our certification program have introduced this into their point of sale, and most have made it mandatory. For example, there's a few whale watching tour operators I've worked with off the coast of BC. They have a mandatory $5 fee that goes to the Pacific Salmon Foundation. So that ensures that that organization can continue conservation efforts to maintain a healthy salmon population, which in turn, of course, supports the whales that they also rely on, and of course the ecosystem relies on. But as tourism operators, that is their main business model. So it serves both benefits in the end.
Shay, can I give another example here? So
yeah, please do.
We talk a lot about Indigenous tourism and the importance of Indigenous tourism in Ontario specifically, but across Canada. And one way to really turn your operations into a way to help with reconciliation is to work with your Indigenous tourism associations at the provincial level or with ITAC. I'm going to add something to the chat here. The ITAC, so the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, has a program called the Indigenous Destination Tourism Fund. It's a very easy way to help with reconciliation and a way of regenerating tourism, not only at the local level, but even with Indigenous communities across the country. So another kind of fun way that you guys can participate in something much larger than just something within the RTO9 region.
Yeah, great example. Thanks, William. There's many ways that you can approach this based on what type of business you are, where you have passion, and ultimately what's really needed in your community. Just take a moment over the weekend or, the next time you're out in your community and think about, what can I improve in my community as a result? And how can I leverage my tourism business to help contribute to, healing your community or ensuring that it can be sustained? A couple of other examples. This is actually something I've seen in my own travels during a stay. I was camping somewhere and I've seen some other travelers walking around with trash bags, and they were picking up trash along the beach just of their own will. They just did it out of the goodness of their hearts. But there could be opportunities to work together in support of something like that. And I think Meg popped the Red Bag program. That's another great initiative that happened this summer in Squamish, where visitors could pick up a red bag from the visitor center, go around the community, fill it up with trash, bring it back, or dispose of it appropriately, and they would receive a small token for a free beer at one of the local businesses. So a really unique idea and something that could potentially be replicated in your own community. Okay, a few more terms that I wanted to just draw attention to because they are talked a lot about for businesses who are pursuing sustainability, and we'll get into this when we talk about sustainability marketing. But it's important that you understand what these terms mean especially if you're moving towards carbon reduction initiatives. So carbon neutral, this is probably the most common term I see, but it really means balancing the amount of greenhouse gases emitted with an equivalent amount removed from the atmosphere, which would have to happen through offsetting anything that you can't reduce. what we've seen from many businesses out there, not just in tourism, I'd say primarily outside of tourism, but there doesn't have to be significant reductions in your emissions in order to achieve carbon neutrality. You could continue business as usual and just continue to offset everything that you produce to become carbon neutral. It's a good first start, most definitely, but where we're starting to move towards, particularly in the face of climate change mitigation and adaptation, is towards net zero. This means that you have to set a near and long-term science-based target. And there's science-based target initiative to help you determine what the best target would be for your size of business. But in general, you'd be looking to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030, and then further reduce to 90% to 95% by 2050. So this is rapid, deep emission cuts. If you're claiming net zero, these are the types of ambitious targets that you would need to set for your business. And then for anything else that could not be eliminated, because you can't eliminate everything with today's technology, that's just not our current reality, you do have to use verified offsets, which emphasize carbon removal to balance anything that could not be eliminated. So carbon neutral focuses more on the offsetting piece, whereas net zero prioritizes significant reductions with minimal reliance on offsets.
There's also, Shay, the discussion about insetting versus offsetting, which, as you know, we're climate neutral. Climate neutral is starting to look at insetting, which is making investments in your business operations and achieving efficiencies and reductions in CO2 emissions as a way of validating your offsetting work that you're doing. So it's a new debate that's coming in, and one that everybody should keep an eye on if you are using carbon offsets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely important to keep an eye on as well some legislation that may be coming in Canada. So there's, sorry. There are changes coming to legislation in Canada around how you can use these terms. So if you're thinking about moving down this line, become familiar with them, understand what they mean for your business. But we'll have more to share on that as we learn more. One final term I wanted to cover before we move into the business case, and this is the term zero waste. Now, this is a definition defined by the Zero Waste International Alliance. If you choose to claim a goal such as zero waste, this means that you have to divert 90% of your waste from landfill or incineration. So this is, the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning and with no discharges to land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. So if you are, close to zero waste, or, you have very little waste in your business, depending on how you operate, just know that the Zero Waste International Alliance has some guidelines that you can use to help ensure that you're complying with that term specifically. Okay. So we'll move into the business case for sustainable tourism. And the reason that we are really covering this topic in today's webinar is that often what we hear from businesses is, as much as they care about the environment, the health of the community, they don't have the time to even think about introducing something like this into their business, assessing their performance, etc. There's a perception that sustainability will be just another cost or line item on the budget, and knowledge. And we covered that in our poll. I actually think, based on what you've responded, you're becoming familiar with the terms. There was very few that hadn't heard of sustainable tourism, and it's definitely cropping up a lot in conversation. So I think as an industry, collectively, we really are bringing up our baseline level of knowledge. Some reasons to really tackle sustainability. Despite these barriers, sustainability has a tremendous opportunity to improve not just the people that you work with, the community that you work in, but it's also good for economic development and your bottom line. And there's some reasons for this. More and more, we are seeing that travelers, consumers, and employees are demanding that businesses have strong social and environmental sustainability practices. When it comes to attracting new employees, businesses that are embracing and integrating sustainability is key to employee satisfaction and retention. Employees, and I'll share this in the next slide, are seeking to work for companies that align to their personal values. And there are also some very tangible cost savings, particularly when focusing on reducing energy, water, and waste, and as costs for using those resources and services are going to continue increasing. Here are some, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Shay, if you can go back to the last slide, there are also some regulatory reasons to work on your sustainability. At least here in Quebec, we have a lot of our provincial programs that require you to have specific sustainability initiatives undertaken within your organization. We refer to those usually as those ESGs, but we've noticed that a lot of the provincial funding grant programs have boxes that you need to check to be able to get access to that. We've also noticed that with the federal government with regards to the Tourism Growth Fund and things like those funding programs. And even some banks now are providing some interesting incentives for businesses that are undertaking sustainability initiatives. There's a chocolate maker at the Gaspé that told me that she applied for a loan from Desjardins, and because she was certified, she got a discount on her loan interest rate. So there's all sorts of really good reasons to start tackling sustainability, not only from the environmental side, but from that regulatory side as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, regulatory as well as funding applications. So this is definitely going to become criteria. I'm hearing that from a lot of funders out there. And it's actually happening right here in BC with the new BC Climate Tourism Resiliency Initiative. So they put a stipulation in their microgrant application that businesses had to have a sustainability plan in place before they could even consider applying for that funding. So you can expect likely see that where you're operating as well. As I mentioned, there is absolutely a correlation between employee retention and businesses that are pursuing sustainability or have this and who are not just talking about it, but they're proactively shaping ESG best practices. And this is where it becomes important to tell your sustainability story, and we'll get to that later on today. But this is some research from PwC in 2021. They polled consumers, employees, and executives and found that more than 80% of employees are more likely to work for a company that stands up for good environmental, social, and governance practices. So if you're comparing apples to apples in terms of attracting employees to work for you, the one that is at least talking about their ESG and has the data to back up how exactly they're taking that action is more likely to attract that employee. At the same time, the demand for sustainability is growing from the public and from travelers. They're becoming increasingly aware of the issues, the demand for sustainable business. And there is some research out there from Booking.com, Deloitte, other research bodies out there. It's quite a high percentage. 87% of travelers that were polled want more sustainable travel options, and 73% would be more likely to choose an accommodation provider if it has implemented sustainability practices. And since this research was published, Booking.com has actually changed the way that they market their listings. You may have seen this if you have a listing with Booking.com or another OTA. They are highlighting social practices in the listing. So they're actually prioritizing third-party certification. So if you hold a third-party certification, such as GreenStep, or there's others, they will be more likely to highlight that in your listing. And there's even filter options for the way that travelers can search for these listings based on their practices. So that's just another added incentive in the way that, you know, this is being marketed and talked about in the travel community. Moving on to some scary talk, which is the increasing carbon tax in Canada. This is something that you definitely should be paying attention to. In 2024, Canada's carbon tax rose to $80 a ton of CO2e. By 2030, that will be increasing to $170 a ton of CO2e. So as I was talking about the cost savings with saving energy, water, and hauling waste, this is where you're going to see the biggest impact on your bottom line when it comes to operating your business. There's a very strong incentive here to act from both that environmental and financial perspective. Reducing your emissions and focusing on carbon reduction in the next few years, really, I would suggest is probably something you should prioritize as a business owner in the next few years. Yeah. And then you can see here by energy type, how that will be increasing, with natural gas increasing significantly. So if you're reliant on natural gas, consider switching to electric. Obviously, there's a lot of considerations there, and we'll get to some of that when we talk about assessing your baseline. So with everything that we've shared, really what we want to communicate is that sustainability can be an enabler to meet the growing consumer and corporate demand for responsible business, avoid greenwashing and green hushing, and I'll introduce those a little bit later, cutting costs and operating more efficiently, improving profitability, attracting and retaining engaged and informed team members, and building trust and support within your communities and stakeholders. And I have one short case study to share with you just around some of the energy savings that you could potentially realize with a relatively short payback period. This is a business that we've worked with, Watermark Beach Resort, and they wanted to see how they could save costs on energy through a lighting retrofit. So this was essentially replacing all of the lighting in the property to LED. They did receive some utility rebates to support the project. There are many utility rebates within the provinces. I'd suggest if you haven't, take a look at what's being offered within not just your community, but across the province. And ultimately, in the end, with the rebates, the total project cost to the business was $19,500. And the estimated annual cost savings based on how much energy they were consuming with non-LED light bulbs was $27,500. So that was an annual energy savings of about 200,000 kilowatt hours. And they had a short payback period. That initial investment, while it can seem high of 19,000, it was already paid back within 3.5 months based on how much they were actually saving on energy costs. So there's definitely ways that you can look at this within your business. Sometimes those capital upgrades will be worth the investment with the support of utility upgrades. And as I've mentioned, there's also grant funding that might be out there if you put a sustainability focus on your application. Okay, so we're going to move into some alignment of global standards, and you might be thinking, okay, how does this apply to my business? You know, there's a lot of things we've talked about at a high level, but how does it apply to tourism? sustainability has a very global lens, and it's important to create consistency in how we track and measure sustainability outcomes. And there are best practices standards in place to ensure that the Canadian tourism industry can keep pace with these best practices. This is an organization, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, that was created, I think, about 20 years now, or 20 years ago. They really are the organization that has set the global standard for sustainable tourism. They've worked very globally with local governments or with national governments, many travel professionals, and at the business level to manage and develop the GSTC criteria, which provides the global baseline standards for sustainable travel and tourism. They have done 2 sets of criteria, the industry criteria, which is what we'll go over today, and they've also created destination criteria, which is more about holistic destination management. But what we'll be focusing on today is the industry criteria. So if we're looking at all of the tourism businesses across the world, how should each of them be approaching sustainability for their business, ensuring that pieces, as I mentioned, like natural and cultural sustainability, are not missed in some of the other types of global frameworks that are out there. They are not a certification. Sometimes this gets a bit mixed up. So I just wanted to highlight that. Rather, they provide formal recognition of standards and accreditation to certification bodies such as GreenStep. So GreenStep has aligned our sustainable tourism assessment to the global sustainable tourism criteria for industry, for businesses. We've done this to ensure that we meet that global standard, but we've also distilled that. So we're meeting the criteria at a high level, and then we take that criteria and we look at Canada and say, okay, what else is relevant to the Canadian tourism industry, and how can we ensure that this global standard is relevant for the types of businesses that we have here in Canada. So we applied for recognition by the GSTC in 2018, and we've been delivering this standard since then to Canadian tourism businesses. It is 87 questions, and it covers 4 pillars of sustainability. And these are aligned to what the GSTC has set out, which is management, social and economic, natural and cultural, and environmental sustainability. And so we'll dive into each of those. Management is much more about effective sustainability planning and management. There's lots of things encompassed in here, part of which is having a written sustainability action plan, measurable goals, and tracking. And if you sign up for the Fast Track Masterclass, this is something that you'll have as an outcome of working through that workshop. It also looks at employee engagement, sometimes through a sustainability team or lead, but how are you engaging employees in your sustainability practices and sharing your progress and tracking with them and being transparent about that. We also talk about visitor engagement. How do you talk about sustainability with your guests? How do you engage them so that they can support your efforts, as well as marketing and communications of sustainability practices. Under social and economic, this is really seeking to ensure viable long-term economic operations and socioeconomic benefits to all stakeholders and your guests. And it can include things like supporting social development. Many businesses I've worked with engage in volunteer programs. They're very active in their communities. So this is probably one of those areas you're likely doing well in. At least that's what I've seen from most tourism businesses. It also includes some of the social and economic pieces I've talked about, ESG, which is employment rights, training, and equal opportunity for your employees. Sustainable purchasing policies, that includes local purchasing. How are you ensuring that the goods and services that you purchase have a positive impact on your local economy? And it also includes having accessible facilities and accessible marketing practices. The cultural pillar is really about respecting the authenticity of host communities, conserving their built and living cultural heritage and traditional values, and contributing to intercultural understanding. So this can include things like protecting cultural heritage, artifacts, and living cultures. How do you talk about the place when you have visitors come to your business? Are you ensuring that you have representation from the entire community? And are you sharing information that's authentic to your values? This also includes managing visitor interactions so that they understand how to be a good visitor when they come to your community and be respectful of the culture. And lots around interpretation and education, really talking about the place that you live, and featuring local guides, arts and crafts. There's lots of ways that you could integrate this within your business. Let's say you were a hotel. How can you work with local artists, artisans, artists to display local art, or communicate those values to the guests who might be staying with you?
Shay, we're doing a program on certification with the Ontario Snow Resorts Association right now, and we just went through a section on the cultural aspects, and many of them we're not aware that by inviting local, artists and craftspeople and even cultural performers, Indigenous communities onto their sites, which they've been doing for years, was part of the criteria. So they were surprised at how sustainable that interaction with their communities was, and they were very proud of the fact that they could answer those questions in the assessment with positive X's because they were doing this work already and they've been doing it for years. So
yeah, that's great to hear. All right, last but not least, we have the environmental section. And this is really focused around how you can maintain essential ecological processes and help to conserve natural heritage and biodiversity in the places that you operate. So this can take the form of resource consumption and conservation, specifically around energy and water, solid waste and wastewater management, carbon emissions and transportation, looking at your fuel usage if you do have company vehicles, and protecting sensitive ecosystems. So this is looking at your engagement with wildlife and the natural space. Are you operating in any sensitive ecosystems? How can you be more aware of wildlife interactions, and really enhancing and supporting the continued biodiversity of the place that you live? Okay. Now, if you're on a computer, you can go ahead. I think someone just shared the link to the free assessment tool. Thank you, Meg. Go ahead and create your sustainable tourism online account. This is the easiest way that you can start measuring your performance. It's 87 questions. As I mentioned, this is the full sustainable tourism assessment in support of the Canadian tourism industry adopting these practices. GreenStep has made a very conscious decision to make this free and accessible to any business across Canada who wants to get started. So if you have the time, go ahead and create the account. Make sure that you check that first circle that you are representing a tourism business. If you're a DMO, you can select that second option. The difference here, if you select the first option, that will give you access to the 87 question business assessment. If you're a DMO attending the webinar and you want to assess the performance of your entire destination, you can select that second option, but I think most participants today are businesses. So make sure you click that top one. You can fill out your information to create your account and get started. And I'll just show you here what the assessment platform looks like. Once you've created an account, it'll come to this main screen. And here you can click the launch assessment to start the questionnaire, and it will highlight all of the 87 questions in each of the subcategories. And you'll need to click on the question if you want to expand it. You can answer any of the questions and they will automatically be saved in the database. So don't worry about having to complete all 87 questions at once. You can start it, come back to it as needed. We've also included some little tips or hints. So if you hover over that little information icon, a little pop-up will come up. So if you're not really sure what the question is asking, you can use that to get a little bit more context or some resources to help you understand how that applies to your business. So we typically say it takes maybe 1 to 2 hours to answer all 87 questions. It really depends how much information you have about each of these aspects. So, maybe you need to go talk to somebody from your maintenance team or a frontline staff member. But generally, you could answer this at a pretty high level for your first time if you haven't done it before. And then at the bottom of question 87, under the Environmental Impacts tab, there's a little button that says Submit Assessment. Once you hit that Submit button, you will be able to see your sustainability scorecard. So this will take you to the reports page, and you'll be able to see at a very high level, how am I performing across each of these areas of sustainability? When it comes to my management practices or my social and economic impacts, how well am I able to meet that criteria out of 100%, which is the top threshold. And on this scorecard, you can also look into the subcategories. I don't have a slide here for that. But this can be quite an easy entry-level baseline assessment. And you can do this year over year. So you'll see on the top here on this slide, your assessment submitted date will be saved. If you want to reassess in 6 months to a year after you've had some time to implement some actions, you'll be able to go back to your previous scorecard and see, was I able to get to 65%? And this can be a very base level or baseline way of looking at your sustainability performance from a very holistic perspective that is based on global best practices. There are some other ways that you can measure baseline performance, and you will see that as you answer the assessment questions. You probably won't have the answer to everything, and that's okay, but it probably just means you have to go elsewhere or do a deeper dive into a specific area of sustainability. Some of the most common ones include doing an energy assessment, a waste audit, water audit, carbon footprint measurement, diversity, equity, inclusion assessment, accessibility, or sometimes just surveying your employees or your guests. How engaged are they? How aware are they of what we're doing? And just to really understand that baseline common understanding of all of the actions that you currently undertake at your business. Now, I wanted to include this slide here. Your region, RTO9, has already undertaken a very significant exercise in going through the destination certification for your entire region. So this was, I think, a 2-year process by the time the certification was awarded, but it's really important that you understand how taking an assessment like this is contributing to the overall sustainability of your destination. Even just doing the simple self-assessment will help inform RTO9. Where can we offer support to our stakeholders? Maybe we're seeing that businesses within our region don't understand how to approach energy efficiency. Well, let's work together with stakeholders, with utility providers, because now we see that there's a gap. But if you don't start the first step of just assessing and using an assessment like this to help inform that, the support might not be there. So it's definitely a big collective effort to start along this path, but the self-assessment really is the first and easiest thing you can do in support of this greater destination sustainability initiative.
As we know, data is so important, for lobbying or doing advocacy work with local regional, provincial governments on different ways that they can assist tourism operators to improve their sustainability, even if it's things like public transit or getting shuttles from hotels to tourism attractions, things like that. This type of data is so important for destinations, and you guys, the operators, are the ones that are going to be key to getting data into the right hands.
So now question for everyone here. Have you assessed your performance in sustainability? This can be through the Sustainable Tourism Assessment, but this could be related to any of the areas I've mentioned in a couple slides ago. You know, have you looked at energy efficiency? Have you done an accessibility audit? Really, we just want to get an understanding of, have you done this? And if you have, please share what you've done in the chat so that you can share that story with others here. Okay, we have a few yeses, but a lot of no's. So if you're on the no, get started with that sustainable tourism assessment. That really is going to give you a holistic picture of, okay, these are all of the things I can do. What are one or two things out of this assessment that I could also potentially focus on based on how well I do on that scorecard? For those who answered yes, yes, please share any of your experiences in the chat. Would love to hear what you've done. Sorry, I've lost my screen here. There it is. All right. Moving into our last topic of the day. This is talking about sharing your sustainability story. And there's a few key terms that I'd like to go over to get this started. Something that is important to address is the risk of greenwashing. What this means is that you are marketing untrue, unsupported, or misleading information that claims that your products or services are more environmentally sound than they truly are. This is something that we see from all types of businesses in the industry. And it's not to scare you from sharing your story, but it's important to be aware of. If you want to talk about sustainability, just make sure that you have the data to back that up. That's ultimately the best way that you can approach, not becoming across as greenwashing, because it really can threaten your reputation and your social license. I will talk about some others. Oh, sorry, did you have?
I was going to say, are you going to talk about the EU green legislation?
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, so if any of you work with the travel trade sector and bring in European visitors, there are stringent rules that apply to Europeans tour operators that bring clients to Canada about green labeling and greenwashing. And if you work with tour operators that bring in, say, French or German or English clients, you can face some significant potential issues with that if you are greenwashing. So this is something that the trade industry doesn't communicate effectively, but there are some European rules that are now going to apply to German visitors coming to, say, Kingston. So just be aware of that. And greenwashing is something that we're going to have to be very much aware of in the next years because of that new legislation.
Mm-hmm. Do you mind sharing a link, William, to that legislation
sure.
for everyone? Thanks. There was another case with a business tour operator who was operating in the UK, but they had other offices throughout the globe. It was even just about the terms that they were using on the posters to display and talk about their product. So one of the terms that they were using was climate-friendly travel, when the product itself included traveling by plane, even though they had made efforts towards offsetting. So take a look at the legislation, just become familiar with what it means. And ultimately, the best way that you can avoid greenwashing is to aim for transparency in action and authenticity in your communication, publish baseline metrics and current data, and just acknowledge missed targets. We're going to talk about some commitments that you can make in the short term through the Sustainable Tourism 2030 pledge, but it's okay if you don't make the target. Just talk about it. Say, maybe we didn't hit the target, but this is what we did do, and this is how we're going to change it going forward. That is really
talk about the challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be transparent and be honest and say, oh yeah, we did really well here, but we failed here because of XYZ.
Yeah,
it could be time,
exactly.
It could be resources, it could be anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's been happening in the industry is that because of things like this legislation or people feeling like they don't have enough knowledge around the language of sustainability, what's been happening is green hushing, which is that businesses are underreporting their sustainability practices to avoid public scrutiny. And really what we're trying to communicate is that sustainability is a journey. Businesses should not be afraid to share their story. While you do have to consider carefully, what you're communicating to avoid greenwashing, failing to communicate is green hushing. And that can cost your business potential revenue and lost opportunities in employee attraction, retention, engagement, and productivity. And ultimately, a lot of businesses are doing incredible work, and we often don't hear about it or talk about it enough. So it's really important to share those successes to inspire others so that we really can create a tourism industry that is sustainable across any destination. I have already shared a couple of points around how you can avoid both of these phenomenon, but really the best practice is to leverage your baseline assessment and action plan to tell a credible story. Even if you just took that sustainable tourism assessment and you wanted to share, this is the score that we got, we're aiming for 65% next year. That is a very easy way, an entry-level way that you could start to communicate this. Talk about what those goals and targets are. What are you currently doing? I'll just ask, if you haven't already, to pop that Elmhurst Resort link in there. They've done a really great job of talking about all of the things that they've done, as well as what they're continuing to commit to do in the future. Really taking a transparent approach. All right, and I have a video to share with everyone. This was a series done in Whistler, showcasing some of the actions that a business is taking. And you'll see some of the steps that we've talked about, what they're currently doing, and what they're going to focus on in the future. So I will go ahead and play that.
My name is Mike Douglas, and I am checking in with Whistler businesses that are putting sustainability and environmental initiatives at the forefront of their operations. Look, we're all on this journey together. We all need to make changes, so let's see some. Right, so Joseph, which room is mine?
Here in British Columbia, 97% of our energy comes from renewable sources, such as hydroelectricity, which means travelers to Whistler do leave a lighter carbon footprint.
Well, that's great. Does all your energy for the hotel come from hydro?
Well, not yet, but we aim to be net zero by 2030.
Hold up. This doesn't look like my room.
This is how we track our energy usage.
Cool. So what am I looking at here?
Well, this software tracks our energy, carbon, and water consumption, along with the waste. It can drill down to what each of the rooms are using.
So you can actually look at this and figure out what the carbon footprint for every room in this hotel is.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We average about 12.58 kilograms of carbon per room per night. We have to reduce this by 5% till the end of the year to stay on track of our targets.
So that includes everything from heating, cooling, appliances, electronics, the stoves in the kitchen, the water usage, and waste management, right?
Yes, that's right, Mike, and it's all recorded.
So how are you guys going to meet your target?
Well, let's start in your room.
Finally.
Did you notice the reduced flow shower heads?
No, actually.
Good.
We replaced the old faucet restrictors with new ones, half the flow rate. Did the same thing with the shower.
You wouldn't know it.
We're also upgrading to smart thermostats. These give us the opportunity to measure energy usage by room.
So you can optimize the efficiency of each room, right?
Exactly.
So what if I'm out in the mountains all day?
The smart thermostat will know you've left and reduce heating or cooling down to a certain level.
So even if you go outside for 5 minutes, it still adjusts, because every little bit counts.
Well, this is great, guys, but I gotta get dressed, so, you know. I got all spruced up for this?
It's okay, come on, Mike. Actually, one of Whistler's biggest emitters of carbon is vehicle traffic.
Yeah, I know the town of Whistler has this thing called the Big Move strategy where they're trying to invest in EV charging infrastructure.
Here at the hotel, we got 14 EV chargers, plus we just got this new electric house car. Check it out.
So what's next to tackle?
We're going to take out our hot water tanks and replace them with smart plate heat exchangers. This is going to really help us with our efficiencies for the hotel.
And you were telling me earlier that one of the old tanks is now being used as a barbecue at this restaurant, right?
Yeah, pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
We're specifically trying to dial in on how to track our food waste. I'm currently looking at various technologies on how to see the way moving forward.
Well, I can tell you one thing, this food is not going to waste.
Oh.
Well, thanks, guys, and good luck with those targets. And if you ever need anyone to come back and check the water pressure, I'm there for you.
Thanks, mate.
They always go for the rope.
Mate!
All right. All right. How do I close this? One second. Open this.
My name is Mike Douglas.
All right. So as you can see from that video, that particular business is taking some pretty advanced actions when it comes to the type of technology that they've installed and the type of tracking to help set those targets. And they've also taken a really unique approach in setting an intensity target. So not only do they know how much energy they're consuming, but they can communicate that on a per room basis. And that's, just one approach and way that you can be creative about trying to tell that story, communicating what you're doing and how you're working to improve, knowing that not everything is perfect, and just being transparent about that through your marketing efforts. William, did you want to share some information about the pledge?
Sure. So when I joined GreenStep, one of the reasons why I joined GreenStep was the pledge. So the Sustainable Tourism 2030 Pledge was a program that we launched with TIAC, the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, back in 2021. Shay, correct me if I'm wrong. It's a free program where we push out the message that businesses should make a public commitment to improve their sustainability scores between now and 2030. So it's a easy process. You make a public commitment to measure your sustainability performance. You publish it on your website. We will then publish it on our website, the link that I just put into the chat. We'll recognize you in our newsletter. Tayo is very, very keen on you guys joining the pledge as well. They promote each of the members who sign up in Ontario. You'll get, again, you will already have access to the free GreenStep Sustainable Tourism Assessment Tool, but I did this when I was with Destination Sherbrooke back in 2022, 2021, and the access to the assessment and the public statement that we made sort of drove us to really work through the process, and we ended up with our destination certification back last fall. So personally, I love the pledge. It's a great tool for businesses. It's a free tool for businesses. And if you go onto the signatories page on the website, the pledge website, you can see that you're part of a very large community of like-minded businesses across Canada, from coast to coast. So it's an amazing program. I strongly suggest that you guys sign up for it. there's a great guide involved as well. There's a guide to how you do the pledge on the website itself. So, go for it. Make that public commitment.
Thanks, William. Yeah, it's we've got a poll here in a second for everyone, but really, if you don't have to be to the level of sustainability that I shared in that video to get started. That's really what we're trying to communicate. Have a look at what the other signatories have published for their public commitment. The pledge page also has a sample public commitment. So we've already got some of the language there for you. Really, all that you would have to do is add a couple of bullet points, even 3 to 4 bullet points about what you'd like to work towards in the next year.
Shay, I always say it's a choose your own adventure. I might be dating myself a little bit, but I was a big choose your own adventure book fan when I was a kid. Sustainability is a choose your own adventure. You guys, like we said with the SDGs, pick what you like, pick what you're passionate about, and promote it, and then work on it, because that's the best way to achieve success in this sustainability movement, is to do things you like. And that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as you're going through that sustainable tourism assessment, you can even just pick one of the questions or one of the answer options and put it into your public commitment. This is something that is unchecked. We want to focus on that. Just choose a couple of things, as William said, that you're passionate about. Maybe they're all from the environmental category, or maybe you pick one from each. There's lots of different ways that you can approach this, and there's no one right way to do it. Last poll that we have for everyone. Are you already sharing, or do you talk about sustainability efforts with staff or guests? Give you a few seconds to respond. All right, more than I was expecting. This is really good. If you are willing to share, or if you have, some information published on your website, if you have a sustainability page, please do share that in the chat. This is a really great opportunity to share all of the great work that you're doing already with each other. So that's great to hear that there's so many yeses. All right, this slide switcher is not coming up again. There it is. Okay. Really like to close off again just with some final comments around how RTO9 is there for you to support your journey. This webinar is just the first step in what is to come. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there will be a Fast Track to Sustainability Masterclass happening next January. Do take advantage of that if you really would like some hand-holding along how to create a sustainability action plan. And not only that, it's a really great opportunity to come together as a business community. As I've said, you're probably doing a lot already. And what I find at the end of these masterclasses, people don't really realize that until they've got through. And William said the same around the cultural piece of sustainability. I think the best ideas are duplicated, not always come up with. So sometimes it's just a chance to come together through learning, through measuring, and a really facilitated way to get into the details of how you can support each other on this journey. And with that, I would like to open it up to any questions.
I'm just going to pop on in the meantime while we wait to see if there's any questions to show up in the chat or in the Q&A box there at the bottom. If you have any questions for Shay or William, this is your chance to ask them. But again, I'm going to plug the workshop series that we're doing as well in January, February. It's a limited number of spots, so if you're interested, make sure you're signing up in advance. I know that there is a price tag associated with it. It's just that it's normally a much higher ticket value if you're going through GreenStep. RTO9 is just offering to subsidize the program for operators who are interested in actually developing their sustainability action plan. And what we're hoping is that once you have that in place, you can look at how you might want to be implementing it in the region. I know there's lots of different operators across the region who are at different levels of sustainability, but this is your chance that, let's say if you're on square one on developing a plan for you to get to that next stage. Elaine, I see your comment in the chat about the links being sent in an email. Yes, I absolutely can make sure that all of those links are included in the follow-up email that you'll be getting. Great information from GreenStep today. How about Shay and William, you might be able to answer some questions for me about GreenStep. Now, do you think, in your opinion, is it something that does every single operator need to get GreenStep certified, or do you recommend a different kind of process for individual operators to kind of work through their sustainability journey?
Do you want me to take a first? Want me to do a first run, Shay?
Sure. I think it'd be interesting from your perspective as someone who went through the certification first.
Yeah, so I went through the certification from a destination perspective, not from a business perspective. Business certification is much easier than destination. Meg, I'm sure you can attest to that. It took me 8 months to do ours. From a business perspective, certification is easy, but so GreenStep, we didn't talk about the cycle of life in sustainable tourism. We have a model with GreenStep where we start with the learning process, and we go through the planning, the acting, the communication side, then the celebration, but the importance of then repeating that on an annual cycle. And certification is only one step in there. What's really important is that businesses take on the process of becoming more sustainable, whether it's on the environment side, on the management side, on the nature, or on the socioeconomic side. That's what matters. Certification is just a way for you to celebrate that. So if you feel like celebrating it, do the certification. But what's really important is that you undertake the process. It's important, tourism is responsible globally for 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. Clients are looking for it, staff are looking for it, it's becoming regulatory. So it's the doing of it that matters more than the certification. That's my perspective. Shay,
I was actually going to echo those comments as well. Speaking from an assessor's perspective and businesses I've worked with, I've certified businesses who are absolutely brand new to the journey and they wanted to sign up and get certified right away. And they're, what they found in going through the process is it actually really supported their learning journey. So they didn't just get, this certification. At the end of it, they said, wow, I didn't realize what we were doing and everything we're not doing. And so what they got at the end of the certification, we do include some recommendations there based on some of those gaps. Now they have an action plan as a result of going through that, and they can implement that in the next 2 years, which is how long our certification is valid for. I've also worked with businesses who are very high performing. They've been at this for a very long time, and now they're saying, now we're ready to get certified. It really depends on the person, on the business owner, where their interests lie. Again, it's really up to them.
Perfect. And do you see some common themes around what businesses, maybe specifically small, medium businesses, tend to struggle with the most when it comes to getting more sustainable or incorporating some sustainable practices?
William, I probably have the same answer for this one.
You say yours and then I'll say mine.
Tracking.
Yeah, exactly. Tracking is the challenge, especially on the environment side. They may be a little bit better on that sort of socioeconomic impact, purchasing, things like that, where there's already hard data within the organization. But it's the tracking generally speaking, but more specifically on the environment side, that businesses are not taking on yet. And the the action planning that you'll do during the workshops will help you start tracking your performance, which is really important in that repetition of annual improvements. So
Yeah, and I think the biggest piece of advice I could give is you don't have to be tracking everything at the same time and all at once. Start with one thing. If you have no baseline data, but you see, okay, our energy consumption is very high. This is a high cost to our business. We really want to drill down into energy. You can just start with tracking that one thing, get good at tracking it, and then it's much easier to add something else into the mix afterwards.
Perfect. I was going to say this is also a good segue into saying talk to your local municipality, see what they're doing. Because I know I'm Gananoque here in RTO9, and we don't have composting. It's not a program that the town currently offers because it's not a huge population. But the more voices you have added to different programs that you want at the municipal level, it gives you the opportunity to kind of make those changes and push policymakers to add those kinds of programs into what is currently being offered. Because if you have a whole bunch of businesses and residents in your town that are all looking for a recycling program or a composting program, it increases the likelihood of that coming to the table at some point or being put on the priority of getting into action. So things to think about when you're looking at your business after we end here today and you're thinking, oh, I really wish we could do X thing. It's always worth reaching out to your local municipality or policymakers or organizations in your area that might be able to assist with developing some of these things. If you're in the Kingston area, there's a Sustainable Kingston as well, who really spearheads a lot of sustainable initiatives. So it's worth looking into, worth reaching out if you're looking for something specific. Any final comments from you, Shay, or William for today?
Yeah, I think I'll just recap a couple of key points that I've said already. Sustainability sometimes can feel very hard. It can feel very difficult to get started and very overwhelming. What I suggest is if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, just chip away at the sustainable tourism assessment. Even if 87 questions feels like too much, set yourself a goal. Maybe I'm going to answer 10 questions today, 10 tomorrow, and just take some time to really dig into each topic. It doesn't have to be too difficult. Start with what you can do, celebrate what you're doing, start talking about it if you aren't already, at least just to get the conversation going. Maybe you're not ready to start marketing it, but talk to your staff. What ideas do they have? They probably have a lot of knowledge from prior roles, from prior experience, or just ideas from the operations side, at least just to get the dialogue going.
And my one addition here is make sure that you collect all of the work that you're doing, whether it's on the management side, the socioeconomic side, nature, culture, environment. Collect the data in one place and write everything down. Because if you do go into certification, I always tell this to businesses across the country, certification is like a court case. If your evidence is not written down, it's not evidence. So even if you're not going to go into certification, create a shared file with your staff or internally on your own desktop, and put all your sustainability work that you're doing in there. As you're going through the assessment and you're finding out that you're doing things that you didn't think you were, create a document, put it there as an official document for your business, and you'll have a wealth of resources whenever somebody's going to be asking you a question about what are you doing about sustainability. Well, it's all written down. So that's my biggest piece of advice, because when I was doing our destination certification, there was lots of stuff that wasn't written down and we had to write it down before we could get certified. So that's my piece of advice for today.
I would say that's a great piece of advice, having gone through the certification. It's a great piece of advice. Well, I don't see any questions, so we will give everybody a little bit of time back today. Just a reminder that there will be a follow-up email going out. I will include links that were provided during the presentation today, as well as the survey link if you're able to provide some feedback, and there will be a recording of this. So if you wanted to go back, if there's a piece of information that came up that you're like, ooh, I can't remember what was said, you can go back and rewatch it. But otherwise, I will say bye to Shay and William. Thank you so much for joining us today and speaking on this really important topic. And hopefully we'll be seeing you guys again soon in January, February for the master class where everyone will be getting their action plans together.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you everyone
care.
for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.